As I mentioned in the beginning of Mass, that today is the official end liturgically of the Christmas season. Now, maybe your Christmas decorations have been down for a period of time already, but today is the day that we kind of say most of our things are also taken away and put away until the next year. We hope, though, that the spirit of Christmas stays alive in our hearts. The one piece of artwork or decoration that we do keep up is the nativity scene, and we keep that up through February the 2nd. That is 40 days after Christmas. It is the feast of the presentation of the Lord, and that is the day that we celebrate that Mary and Joseph took the child to the temple in order to be blessed, in order to be presented there and to receive the gift of faith, and to be, according to the Jewish tradition, that he would be raised in the faith. It was a decision that they were making, and so we honor that on February the 2nd. And we keep it out because in the Vatican, they keep out the nativity scene as well through February 2nd. It's been kind of a tradition there. So if it's good enough for the Vatican, it's good enough for us here at Annunciation as well. But I think today is the day that we remember and we mark that Jesus grew up. He did not stay a child. He did not stay a child. So we've only had a couple of weeks of readings where he was a child, where, we have the birth of Christ, we have the presentation, which is February the 2nd. It actually falls on a Sunday this year. We have the finding in the temple. We have the flight to Egypt. So those are just a few of the scenes that we hear about the life of Jesus. But basically, he goes from being a toddler to being about 30 years old very quickly. And we don't know anything about those years. They're what we would call the hidden years. And we can only think that he was raised in a very normal family situation, that Jesus was very much like us, having human flesh, having a human will, but also having the will of God. He had a divine will. So certainly for the Lord, his humanity and divinity were fused together. And I'm sure that those years were beautiful years for Mary and Jesus and for Joseph as well. But we have a lot of question marks. There's not a lot that is documented about what those years were like. But today we see how the Lord presents himself again for baptism by John there in the Jordan. And so John was baptizing people. It wasn't known necessarily as baptism, but what it was known as was a part of a preparing for the end time. And that was a ritual that John performed and that John was celebrating with his disciples. And Jesus was attracted to that. So Jesus would have said, well, I think I'm going to do this as well. We may wonder in our theology of baptism over the centuries, we feel as though baptism wipes away original sin. Well, Jesus didn't have original sin. So Jesus did not have to be baptized in the same way that we ask for baptism, but he chose to do it. And part of that is because it set a good example. He said, well, if I expect my followers to do this, then I myself need to do it. And then secondly, it gave him an identity. The last line of our gospel reading today, what does it tell us? You are my beloved Son, in whom my favor rests, in whom I am well pleased. And so we see this beautiful identifying of Jesus as the Son. And we know that in some scriptures, like in Mark, Jesus tells people after a healing, don't tell anybody who did this. But we already know who he is. We know who he is because God identified Jesus in the gift of his own baptism. He gave him that title of, you are my Son. And I think there's something very beautiful about that, because this is what baptism gives to us. It gives us an identity as sons and daughters of God. It introduces us into the family of God, makes us a part of that family. And so just as Jesus was identified as the Son, at our baptism, we also are identified by a name. And names are beautiful, and parents choose a name. That's kind of a tradition across cultures. And in thinking about the homily today, I came across something that I thought was kind of beautiful, and it was that in the African tradition, and I think it even was written about in Roots by Alex Haley, and he wrote about how that in their tradition, the name of the child is determined by the parents, but then they don't speak the name. They don't speak the name. The first time the name is spoken is when it is whispered into the baby's ear 3 times, because they feel as though the child should be the first to hear their name. I think there's something very beautiful about that, because we accept a name. A name should be something that is given to us as part of our tradition, a gift from our parents. Sometimes people ask us, well, do you have to have a name that is a traditional Christian name in order to be baptized? And the answer is no. We respect what the parents bring and the name that the parents choose. I do think that it is important that really we have a patron. So if you choose a name that's maybe not a traditional Christian name, maybe that you would choose a middle name that would be, or give your child a patron saint of some sort. It's another reason why at confirmation we choose a name, so that we can, once we've developed ourselves physically, emotionally, and spiritually, that we have that opportunity to connect with the communion of saints through the gift of a name. Our baptism reaffirms the name that was given to us. So in baptism, we always say the name. You'll see that in just a few moments as we baptize these 3 children today. So we repeat the name because it's affirming the name the parents have given to the child. And that's something they will have with them their whole life. And it's presenting that name now to God, saying, God, this is now one of your children. God embraces these children. We have infant baptism in our faith. That's something we're challenged on by other traditions. And the question is, well, why do we have infant baptism? Other faiths say, well, shouldn't the person make that determination themselves? Well, probably the best ability to understand that is because in our faith and in our culture, let's face it, parents are responsible for their children. Kids, until you're 18 years old, your parents are going to make decisions for you. And that's okay, because God entrusted you to them. So God trusts that the parents are going to make good decisions. So the parents make decisions about how you are cared for physically. Parents make decisions about how you are educated, about how you are treated in terms of, in a healthy manner and setting good boundaries in a home. Well, in that same way, parents are given the ability to raise their children in the faith and to make a decision for you to be baptized. So this has been going on since about the 3rd century in our faith, that infant baptism is a practice of our tradition. So in baptism, it's rooted deeply in tradition, not just by giving an identity and reaffirming our name and presenting that name to God. Baptism gives us a mission. It gives us a mission of who we are and what we are to do. What are we to do? We are to seek a life of holiness. That means that our words, our thoughts, our actions should always be directed towards holiness, towards being saintly. And there's a tension there, because the world and the evil one is present in the world. The world is good because God created it, but there are some forces within that can take us away. So what does baptism do? It equips us with an armor. It equips us with ability. It equips us with faith, with the ability to make good decisions, because the devil doesn't like it when we make decisions that are godly. But by having a relationship with the divine, with the church, with our faith, then we are more inclined to make good decisions, hopefully to see all the options and not to give into our own personal desires for fulfillment, but rather to be able to say, what does God want for me as his child? What does God want for me in a situation? So we take that opportunity to accept our identity, to understand our mission, and thirdly, to look forward to our destiny. In baptism, it's saying the earth and this world is not only what you are about, but you can have a life far beyond here. Our life goes beyond this world. Baptism helps us to understand the other world, and that is heaven. My friends, our destiny is heaven. We are merely pilgrims through this life, and in this world, we're journeying through. Just like I mentioned last weekend about the wise men journeying there, and they found Christ, and they journeyed further a different way. They went back by a different route. We also are journeying. Where are we journeying to? Ultimately, we are citizens, not of a country, but of a kingdom. Ultimately, we are citizens of the kingdom of heaven. So the sooner we understand that, the sooner we embrace it, the sooner we merge that with our life here on earth, the more we can find happiness, the more that we will find the gift of God's peace. So today, as we baptize the children, I ask you to think about your own baptism. No, you may not remember it because probably you were baptized very young as a child. But remember your baptism. Every time you bless yourself on the way in, and we have a font that's right in the middle of the foyer of the church, of the narthex. It's right there in the middle. It's what we call a confrontational font, because you have to confront it. You cannot get into the church without going by that font and being reminded of your baptism the first time you entered the church. And so by blessing ourselves, we're reminded of that baptism. And I hope it is a reminder of your identity, of our mission, and also of our ultimate destiny.